Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. With the race hotting up for second in the Constructors' Championship, Ferrari may have been dealt a blow by another engine penalty just around the corner. Mercedes and Red Bull should be okay to the end of the year. Ferrari will need another one. That's another relatively significant grid place penalty potentially coming up relatively soon. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. It really helps out the channel. Thank you very much indeed for doing that one. Plenty to discuss on the driver's side. Firstly, Daniel Riccardo being asked about this a lot. He says, look, if I'm on the grid, I want to know it's a place I can enjoy and feel like I can thrive in. I don't want just to jump into a car for the sake of it. Many drivers are of course linked right now to the Williams seat for next season. The Haas seat as well might be available because Mick Schumacher, we don't know where he's going to go. Probably not in the Haas is our current understanding. Things could of course change, but Riccardo pretty much not ruling out the possibility of taking a year break. Now apparently Antonio Giovinazzi, linked briefly to Haas, is now being additionally linked to Alpine. Alpine, I don't know what's going on there. They're considering everyone, it seems, right now. And apparently Giovinazzi might be back in the Alpine seat. Like, look, we'll just have to see. They're testing anyone and everyone they can get their hands on right now, Alpine. So it could be Giovinazzi, might not be. Alfa Romeo, pretty clear they're going to stay with Bottas and guanyu for next season. So I think that's good news all around. Definitely deserves another chance in that seat for next year. Has done incredibly well, actually, I think, the last few races. Joe even picked up another point most recently back in Monza. Now, this just to mention from Joe Sauer, who came up with this in the green notebook, just mentioning real quick what the plan is with Alfa Romeo, saying that of course, look, the Sauber Alfa Romeo deal is coming to an end because Audi are going to take over the Sauber relationship. Therefore, apparently Alfa Romeo wants to go to Haas and effectively have the same partnership they have with Sauber over with Haas. Now apparently though, Haas have a massive title sponsorship deal coming soon with a big American corporation. Guess you guys leave it to the imagination who that might potentially be, but apparently Haas have like a big title sponsor in the works, so they're going to be branded going forwards. Like, yeah, so I suppose we'll see about that one. Could be someone either in or outside motorsport. I guess we'll see how it goes. But that means Alfa Romeo might be struggling to find a spot with Sauber going to Audi. And there was also some talk in this article about Mick Schumacher taking a year out and then returning to drive for Audi Sauber in a couple of years' time. Like, just because with Vettel retiring and with Schumacher maybe gone, there'd be no German driver on the grid. Audi would want that to be the case. So there might be a seat available for Mick Schumacher in a couple of years' time, but maybe not next season. I suppose that remains to be seen what they will plan to do. And this kind of well, echoing the same sentiments here from F1 Insider, saying there's a big money American sponsor coming through, and also Mick Schumacher might even want to leave Haas. Seems semi-surprising. He'd only do that, I guess, if he got another seat. And Williams apparently might be interested. Bit of a mess right now in the driver market, there's no doubt about it. Speaking of Alpine though, on the car side, it's looking rather good. They're still fourth in the constructors. They should be pretty solid to secure fourth because it's not like Riccardo picks up many points. And apparently they've got a new floor arriving for Singapore, which they believe is a massive step forward in terms of downforce. So they're solidly fourth in the constructors right now. But the issue is, of course, with Alonso, reliability issues have plagued Alonso, especially for the majority of the season. But they are expecting to be even faster come Singapore. Now, other teams are bringing upgrades. We know Mercedes are going to continue to bring certain things. Red Bull have pretty much said, what's the point, right? We've got everything secured. Ferrari have a couple of things in the works as well. One for Singapore, one in a couple of races' time. Whether this is going to make a massive difference to their kind of attempt to get second in the constructors remains to be seen, because Mercedes are not far behind, and one DNF can kind of swing the entirety of the way that battle looks. Now, Bottas has kind of confirmed here that the last few races they've had issues with car balance, which brought them more degradation than they've experienced before. They believe that the aero developments they made actually effectively made their car worse and contributed to poor car balance. They were talking about the floor they brought from France onwards that actually brought their car back a step rather than forward a step, at least in terms of race pace, which is where the points are delivered. And that's really the thing, right? We've seen that this season, especially with the new regulations, being on pole, like I saw an analysis of, okay, how dominant is the Red Bull car? Just because actually in terms of average qualifying pace, the Red Bull is slower than the Ferrari. But in terms of a race car, the Red Bull's been dominant in the latter half of the year, because nowadays it's easier to overtake. So, Max can afford to start wherever he wants and still win the race, which might not have been the case around Monza in years past. So, look, there is updates to come for Ferrari. There might be still some positive things for this team to the end of the season. The issue, of course, with Ferrari is that despite how good the car is and everything, they are prone to either exploding or strategy issues affecting the team. So, yes, floor, wing changes might be arriving. Will they secure Ferrari's second place in the constructors? That is, seemingly potentially still doubtful, right? Because, look, Mercedes are chasing it down. They finished pretty much much every race, and arguably right now have better race pace, at least on tracks that suit their car, than the Ferraris do. Monza is a slightly different story, but I think there's a world in which Mercedes can definitely get better results from now to the end of the season than they did from at least the first couple of races of the season, and Mercedes boss Toto Wolff is certainly chasing that possibility down. Now, one thing that of course is going to hurt Ferrari is if they have to take another penalty, which apparently is exactly what is going to happen. Giuliano De Kessa says here in this article that post-technical directive, of course that's the other thing, right? Did the TD that came in from Spa impact Ferrari worse than Red Bull? Kind of seems like it did. And we also heard the rumours that at least in qualifying at Monza, they pretty much maxed out the engine, Ferrari, at a higher power mode than they would usually use, just to try and get pole, please the Tifosi, which is of course what they achieved. Now, apparently the power unit now is probably more reliable than it was at the start of the year. The rumour had it the first part of the season, they were kind of maxing out the power unit to try and get as best performance as they could, which ended up costing them with the DNFs they suffered in the first half of the season. Now, still, it does seem that despite the potential upgrades the power unit has made, and running it maybe at a lower level over the last few races in general, they still are eating up these power units, right? And the engine doesn't seem particularly reliable. It doesn't seem like it can last that long, because apparently another ICE is needed by the end of the year, which might be, what, the 6th for Leclerc and Sainz potentially, which obviously isn't good for them. Because of course Leclerc bought a new one in Spa, Sainz bought a new one in Monza, and then, they've got to go to the end of the season. Now, Hamilton and Russell probably should be okay, and of course Perez bought a new one in Monza, Verstappen bought a new one in Monza as well, and also back in Spa, just to make sure they had enough to make itself safe for the end of the season. Just Red Bull were just trying to make sure there with Verstappen's extra power unit that, or at least ICE, that he'd be able to make it to the end of the season with no issues. Now, there's about 6 races to go. There is still the USA to come, COTA, which should be maybe a more beneficial overtaking track than others, and therefore that seemingly is the plan for potentially both Ferrari cars to take yet another power unit penalty come Austin, effectively in that kind of zone. Now, that of course would be, because it's their 6th, 5th, whatever internal combustion engine, their 5th-place grid penalty, just like Verstappen had. So if Leclerc was to be on pole, then he would start 6th, and it would work the same way that we saw happen just this past weekend, with Verstappen ending up 7th as he did from 2nd place on the qualifying performance. So look, this is affecting Ferrari yet again. Their reliability of the engine doesn't really seem to be there, and even if the engine isn't exploding, it's like it's wearing itself out quicker than some of the other power units, it seems, to which point they're going to have to take another one. Now look, a 5th-place penalty, as we saw with Verstappen, isn't really that big of a deal. You can make that up within a lap as well, at least in Verstappen's car. With Verstappen at the wheel, and Sainz in fairness did a similar thing back at Monza. So look, the 5th-place penalty might not look massive, but the key issue that Mercedes have had is qualifying ahead of the Ferraris, right? Because for Mercedes, trying to get second in the constructors or wherever, they need to be trying to win races, get second places in races, and the issue that they have is that if the front 4 cars are, even though lately Perez has been off the boil, but if the front 4 cars are 2 Red Bulls, 2 Ferraris, then 2 Mercedes, then by the time the potentially slightly superior race pace of the Mercedes to the Ferrari kicks in, then the Red Bulls are way up the roads, and maybe Mercedes get a podium, but they don't really gain that many points on Ferrari. So the possibility of being able to start 2nd or 3rd on the grid, as opposed to starting 5th or 6th on the grid, is a pretty big deal for Mercedes at whatever race this happens at, and potentially they might take another one at COTA, we shall see, but maybe Mexico's a possibility as well. But there's some tracks that you want to take these penalties, there's some tracks you don't, but more bad news I suppose for Ferrari. Yes, they've got some upgrades, but another penalty to come for them from now to the end of the season. Might be the case with Russell or something as well, that's still possible. Potentially Hamilton should now be okay. And of course the other thing with Ferrari is that even if they're actually okay in terms of pure performance, right, their strategy hasn't been ideal either. And just to mention this, I thought was rather interesting, that last year at Budapest, to overtake around there, you needed a delta in terms of performance over one lap of 1.5 seconds. You need to be that much quicker over a lap in order to have enough to pass. This year it was only 0.3 of a second, and in Monza it was only 0.15 of a second. So you barely needed any speed advantage, because usually around the Parabolica you lose so much distance because you have no downforce because of the car in front that you really suffer. This time around it seemed to be okay, which makes passing in the race way easier. So that could be beneficial to Ferrari fighting their way through the field with the penalties that we shall see, but also it could be potentially disadvantageous depending on what the strategy crew decide to do as well. So yes, Ferrari has some upgrades, but looking at it on paper, it seems like it's very much all to play for, right? Mercedes are currently slightly behind, but probably won't have to take the penalties that Ferrari are going to be taking. Yes, qualifying pace has favoured Ferrari, but we've seen them mention that their car in terms of race pace degradation isn't really where it's at. They have to pit earlier generally than Mercedes and Red Bull. That means that yes, let's say Ferrari are leading the Mercedes in the Singapore Singapore Grand Prix, but Ferrari have to pit earlier, their tyres fall off harder, therefore, Mercedes can make further ground, complete the overcut potentially, or even just have way fresher tyres towards the end of the race. So what do you guys think, right? Who's going to get second in the Constructors? The momentum has seemingly been with Mercedes for quite some time, and, without the Hamilton DNF in Spa, these numbers would probably look a fair bit closer, right? So I'd probably err on the side of Mercedes just about getting there with the Ferrari penalties, and, Ferrari are just a massive question mark, and the possibility of them getting third in a 2-horse race probably seems about right to kind of sum up their season in a way. And just to look at this, the race finish position heat map this season, in fairness to Nicholas Latifi, I mean, look at him, P16, he's made that his own. But yeah, Verstappen, like 11 P1s, it's just absolutely ridiculous. The only race he was, P7, and of course was Silverstone, where he had the damage to his floor. Even George Russell, very impressive with 6 third places, Perez at 6 second places, Norris at 6 seventh places. So yeah, quite interesting to look at this, but very much enjoyed your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you are new, take care, and I'll see you next time.